Okay, for everyone who can't see online, we are like beyond capacity in this room, which is appropriate because the future of open banking is open finance, and we're going to talk about how to do that. I want to start, though, by talking about my favorite movie and why this matters to me so much. So my favorite movie is Cool Hand Luke. Always has been. For those, show of hands, who's seen Cool Hand Luke? All right, a decent number of people. There's a famous scene in it where Luke, the main character, is able to eat 50 eggs at one time. That's not actually my favorite scene in the movie. My favorite scene in the movie is Luke is someone who's been arrested. He's on a prison work gang in the South, and one of their jobs is to resurface a dirt road. So it's like 150 degrees. They're out there shoveling sand onto this dirt road, tarring it. And it's awful. And Luke is like a real anti-establishment, anti-authority guy. And so he says, let's stick it to the man. Let's work harder and faster and make the best dirt road possible. And they race and finish the entire thing in half the time that was expected. It's now the best dirt road in Alabama, and it's a victory against his oppressors that he's done it so well. And I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still a dirt road. And dirt roads are great until you drive on asphalt for the first time. And I think we're in a critical moment in open banking where we are making this transition from the legacy approach to accessing data to API access. And that's like the asphalt road that is going to be the future powering the entire ecosystem. And that's what's so exciting to me is we get to talk about that today with my colleague and good friend, Don Cardinal from the Financial Data Exchange. FDX, and I'll let you talk a little bit about it, is building an industry interoperable standard for APIs for the future of open finance. And I'm also here with Raja Chakravorty, who's going to talk about what Plaid is doing in that area. But let me start, Don, with you. Can you just tell me a little bit about sort of where the industry is today and what FDX's role is in it to sort of bring us to this API future?
Sure. FDX is a tech standards body, but the idea is we need a common interoperable interface that no one player owned. And as a not-for-profit, we'll never compete with anyone in the space. So we're the Bluetooth of data sharing. Now, Bluetooth doesn't build the headsets. They don't build the devices. But they provide a tent that everyone can come together. Competitors can do so and comply with antitrust laws and build the best possible road they possibly can and make it available for anyone in the space. And indeed, our spec is free of charge. We just say, promise not to patent it. Don't try to. It's not a good idea. That's the one ask we have, and don't be on a sanctions list. Other than that, it's free to use. But yeah, please come and join and contribute to it. We have 32 million people who've already migrated their held away credentials to OAuth tokens in FDX. That's a good sign. We're getting there, but more to come.
And 32 million, you were just telling me last night, that's around 1 million consumers a month, right?
That's
that are
correct.
Shifting to the FDX standard.
Just over 1.1 million per month, and it's growing. As more people on board, that curve is going to continue to shift upward. It's just a better way of doing things. It's safer. There's more control. It actually is less burdensome, and actually it was at the Jack Henry conference last week, and it is indeed less costly. Because instead of painting screens on an expensive web server or an app server, you actually put them on an API that's 100 times more efficient. We need less hardware. That means less money. So it saves you money.
So that's from sort of the industry standard perspective. And full disclosure, everyone, Plaid is a board member of FDX. So we see it from that perspective as well. But Raja, I hope you can tell us, from a Plaid perspective, what are you seeing in terms of what the industry need is and what FIs and others are trying to solve for right now?
Yeah, well, I love the Cool Hand Luke reference. It reminds me of a more contemporary film, the 1985 Robert Zemeckis film Back to the Future, where at the very end of it, Doc Brown comes in on a floating vehicle and says, "Where we're going, we do not need roads."
Yeah.
From the Plaid perspective, the most important thing that we are very focused on consumers, and you sure as heck know that we need roads.
Yep.
And that's actually the most important thing from our perspective. And so we were able to see a couple stats earlier today, but to reflect on a few of them, one that we saw was that 9 out of 10 consumers are choosing fintech today. But moreover, 69% of consumers in the same Harris poll that we launched with Plaid late last year suggested that they would actually change their primary financial institution if they were not supported by their financial institution to connect to fintech. Now that's dramatic. It actually means that in the absence of having that road to get there, that financial institution is going to be left behind. So the most important thing that we've realized is that data connectivity is absolutely critical. Now the transition for me though is that not every institution, though they understand they need to have connectivity, actually knows how to get there. And that's created a number of innovations as the industry has tried to bring organizations along. But what I'm most excited about is an opportunity now where we can actually create something scalable that works for all institutions.
And Don, you're working directly on that scalability. So can you talk a little bit, like Roger just laid out that great need. Why in the world would every bank reinvent their own API, right? That feels like a huge wasted effort. You're not getting any of the savings you talked about. So what is FDX doing to bring the industry together around that? Why is having a standards body like FDX so important?
For a variety of reasons. I talked about us being a not-for-profit. We'll never compete with anyone in this space, which means because it's owned by the industry, or really the community, it's free of charge, no one will own it. You're not locked into any one solution. I think that's very important. Two, we have a lot of eyes looking at it. When you crowdsource things, you solve a lot of problems. I like to say the people building FDX have trillions of dollars in deposits, trillions of dollars under management, and trillions of dollars in market cap. This is best-in-class thinking, and we do talk around the planet on our security spec, on user experience, and we shamelessly borrow from each other's best ideas and learn from each other. It's a great community.
So Plaid is not an FI, right? We're a data network. And FIs and fintechs and data networks have not always seen eye to eye. And shocking,
I know.
yeah, there's gambling in Casablanca, to have an even more modern film reference for everyone.
Yes.
So let me just start, let me ask you to channel, I know you speak for all of the members and for the entire ecosystem, but let me ask you to channel your FI members for a little bit. What are they looking for? Like what do they need, what's the problem that they need solved as part of this API transition?
Sure. A couple of points, a little context. 2/3 of the membership of FDX are not banks. People think, oh, it's all banks. Yeah. Actually, if you pull up the member roster and start doing the math, like, oh, wow. But I always get asked, well, how is it that people were fighting in the press a few years ago are working collaboratively on this? What do you got inside dirt on them or what? Him, yes.
And the answer is yes.
But the answer is they're solving a common problem. Now, each have a different view of it, but they have the same common solution. Now, if you're an FI, I want you to put on your banker hat. We ask the FIs, hey, look at your volume. Tell me how many of your customers have coughed up your IDs and passwords. And sure enough, we made them go talk to the people who man the WAF, the Web Access Firewall. And they did the math, and they said, you know what? Roughly 1/3 of our customers in the last year have coughed up their IDs and passwords to get a mortgage in minutes, to do your taxes, for a variety of reasons. I said, well, while you're checking, can you tell me what your volume looks like on your front door? And I said, sure. And they came back, and this was 2 years in a row. We got the same numbers back. 1/3 is bad guy, malicious bots and harvesters. 1/3 is what we call benign automation. That is aggregators. That is apps, people with permission. And then this little sliver on the end, this 1/3, actual carbon-based life forms. So if you're a CIO and you're listening, 2/3 of your web infrastructure is painting screens for other computers who don't care what it looks like. What a waste of money. How would you like to take that middle third and move it to an API that's 100 times more efficient? Here's the deal. You've also given your guys, men and women defending your stuff, instead of a yes, no, and maybe on defense, it's bot or not. Defending a binary in 500 milliseconds or less is a hell of a lot easier and improves your privacy posture. So it gets creds out of the marketplace. There's a variety of reasons I could go on, but that's the big one.
No, you can go. So the get creds out of the marketplace, and then also, better data quality for that customer when they're using a third party, right?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a funny story. What's my balance on my credit card? Well, that's awfully easy, Don, isn't it? Not really. Pull the screen up. Is it your statement balance? Is it your cash advance balance? Is it promotional balance? And remember, if you're a Java developer and you're scrolling up to a screen, here's a $-denominated field, the word balance next to it. But think about it. If you use that data element in a lending decision, I'm either going to provision you too much credit you really shouldn't have, or I'm going to deny you credit when I shouldn't have. Both are a bad outcome, simply because we don't have a common understanding of what that field should be. And that's why you have a standards body.
So Raja, Don just sort of walked through what FIs need. You, in your role as our universal data access lead at Plaid, you talk to those FIs also. What are you hearing from them in terms of what they want out of an aggregator relationship? And what is Plaid building to sort of address that need?
Yeah, I think, Don, that was a great layout. From our perspective, we also are massive proponents of migrating the industry to API-based connectivity. And we do that in, I'd call it 3 different ways. Well, one, for the majority of the top 10 financial institutions, we know that they're building their own APIs, and we work with them to deliver API-based data connectivity for consumers so that they're able to share their data in a way that is safe, secure, and allows for significant levels of control. The second thing is our work with Don and the FDX to ensure that all of the learnings that we have, which I posit are incredibly deep in the industry, are reflected in all of the same aspirations that FDX has. I think that's actually what's built one of these phenomenal partnerships between FDX and Plaid, is that we have a lot of the experience that allows us to help facilitate the vision that FDX wants to be able to deliver, and this partnership has been one that is only good for consumers. The third is that, well, we've actually thought about what does everyone else look like, right? Like, our mission at Plaid is to provide consumer financial empowerment for everyone. And that means everyone who banks at the smallest of financial institutions to the largest, to using alternative systems or wherever they manage their money. And not every organization is actually geared up towards building out a potentially complicated API. Maybe they have different concepts on what they're investing in, and they're not even sure exactly what is the roadmap for me to be able to build. And that was the effective innovation of our data connectivity suite, which I'm very excited to talk about today, because today we're actually talking about the evolution of that data connectivity suite. The first piece of that is actually a solution we launched in 2020, which is Plaid Exchange. And I think many of you are familiar with that, and we're very, very excited about that solution. That solution currently supports over 1,000 financial institutions. It actually has 40 million plus API connections, the last I checked, spanning institutions as varied as Green Dot, who we heard from earlier, to Vero, to platforms like Q2 and Jack Henry. Like, there's a lot of excitement that we've been able to build there. The next evolution of that, and what we're kind of here to quote unquote announce, though I believe we've announced this several times today.
Those were leaks.
Those were leaks.
This is the announcement. Everything else was a leak.
Yes, is Core Exchange. And Core Exchange, I think, is one of the really great innovations that we've been able to do with FDX. And in fact, Core Exchange itself is a subsidiary of the FDX specification, but similar to what we were talking about before, actually provides a really, I think, thoughtful roadmap on exactly how to adopt these solutions, and ensuring that for our customers' perspective, that we are elevating the use cases that are critically important that we see based off of our industry knowledge. So ensuring that there's the connectivity to personal financial management, to account funding, to all of those use cases that we see, that we ensure that organizations are empowered to be able to ensure those endpoints are available.
And I think one of the other things that's nice about that, and by the way, very exciting,
Yes.
I'm glad you were able to officially launch it just now.
Just now.
Is there's a regulatory certainty element to that as well, right, Don? I mean, there is going to be an expectation, I think, from the regulators that as we move into open finance, we are moving into an API-based open finance, and the question is going to be, what's the gold standard of that API? And so you don't want to just build any API, right? You want to build one that the regulators have accepted and that your partner banks or your sort of peer banks have already adopted. And that's what's part, I think, tell me if I'm wrong about this, that's part of what FDX brings to the table, is that sort of government recognized interoperable framework that you know you're using best in class, and you know you're doing what everyone else is doing as well.
Yeah, it does get a chance when we publish something in our security spec or in our UX spec, we can say, yes, this is the industry, and we can do so fairly. We have consumer groups, academics, in addition to fintechs and service providers. It's a big tent. I think it's one of the things we did right. Now, herding 220 member organizations is a lot of cats. but that's how you get the whole crowdsource behind what is best-in-class thinking, and you identify edge cases, and you make sure that it is fit for purpose and actually has a market-driven, is a solution that's fit for market and scalable.
So Raja, you sort of laid out what we're doing to help drive that and what this solution set. Can you tell me a little bit more about sort of what that solution looks like, how that's aligned with FDX, and I guess most importantly, how much does it cost? Because I think that's going to be a big question for FIs is how much are they paying for this?
Yes, well, let's start with the last question first, which is, it's free.
Hey!
As it should be. It's critically important that we are champions of consumer data rights. And it's critically important that we protect that data and ensure that everyone has access to it. And that's one of the driving factors for why we ensure that our connectivity suite is free. The value to it, from my perspective, is Don was kind of really touching on this. The fact that, one, it is aligned with an evolving regulatory landscape. And I think we're really excited and huge proponents that regulation will ensure that consumers' data rights are protected. But for many financial institutions, they understand that, okay, look, there's this regulatory framework that's evolving. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go. I know that consumers are already choosing fintech, and I need to promote that because in the absence of promoting it, how am I going to maintain my primacy with the consumer account? Well, so who is there to help guide them to provide a solution that aligns with wherever that regulation goes? I think that's been the clear advantage of FDX in this partnership, is that they know that by working with an FDX spec and working with a organization like Plaid, that will give them the tools that are future-facing and future-proofed, such that that evolution in the way in which they kind of build this is consistent, that it is delivering as the regulatory environment evolves. Our evolution of the core exchange specification is the FDX specification, but curated down to drive the fundamental use cases that we see are important to the Plaid ecosystem. And I think that's been really important for us. But importantly so is that that spec is interoperable. And so to Don's point before, it is really important from our perspective to make sure that we're maintaining a leadership role in the environment to ensure that, hey, look, like we see what has been really valuable for consumers. We partnered with FDX to ensure that that's available for everyone. And we want to make sure that the consumer use cases, no matter where they are, no matter what aggregators are plugging in, that it's maintained at the very highest level, ensuring the best possible data quality and ensuring that, that consumers are able to get what they want with the least amount of friction.
So Don, I'll toss it to you now. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this idea of aggregators and banks working together to implement an API spec as sort of the next step in the market?
Well, if you'd asked me in 2015, I would have thought. But things change, risks change, and that's part of it. I think we focus on common purpose. And Rajan points out correctly, if we have an interoperable standard, so no matter how your small fintech, or small FI or credit union wants to share data with a fintech, whether it's Plaid or somebody else, we have to be neutral. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I have to be. The idea, it removes barriers to entry. One of the things I think a common standard is going to be useful for is new entrants. We don't have a lot of diversity in fintech space, and there's certain barriers to entry. Screen scraping is incredibly labor intensive, all those scripts you have to maintain. With a common USB style plug and play API, now that the barrier to entry is a lot lower, you need less startup capital. You're going to see a lot more diverse voices and faces powering fintechs and doing unique things with the space. So I'm very excited about that. And I think banks are also starting to realize that as well, that the innovation lies, I think, elsewhere, and they're not as threatened by it as they were 6-7 years ago.
And I mean, is there still a barrier for banks, right? Like in terms of doing this, like if they don't have the in-house expertise, they don't feel necessarily comfortable, how much of a barrier does that create? And what are the opportunities to sort of get over that barrier?
Sure, there's the whole zero to hero, what do I do about it? Oh my gosh, do I have that in-house? Do I pay for it? And having any sort of tool, even though the FDX spec is free, it's like getting the really big kit from IKEA, and you're like, holy cow. It's a long weekend. But that's when you see people who have solutions that are the skinny down version, because a lot of times if it's just the security module plus PFM, the basics, that really gets people started. And once you get there, then you can always add on to it and get that second Akia module and start to plug in.
So Raja, can you tell me a little bit more about Core Exchange sort of in the market? Who's working with us today on that? What do the sort of prospects look like?
Absolutely. And so I think one of the important elements, and Don, thank you for those comments because I think it actually showcases them, is that we focused on simplifying that implementation of the FDX API spec so that we are providing the most useful but least onerous version of how to actually implement that. And so we're focused on the actual components that are important for a financial institution or a financial services provider to provide data in the market, namely access. That is a key focus area. How do you access the ecosystem? Authentication, ensuring that that's best in class, and then authorization management. And all of these components are embedded in the way in which we've thought through what is most important within this FDX API specification, which is now Core Exchange. We've actually ended up, and we're live in market today, which is also very exciting with this specification. What we've actually seen is a tremendous amount of interest across segments. Certainly, the value to that specification is one that allows organizations to build once and not have to have ongoing maintenance, not have to have ongoing massive teams thinking through, well, what's the next step? What's the next API I have to build? Like, you can kind of, I don't want to say set and forget, but certainly set and let it rest is one of the big advantages to this. And to that point, we've actually worked with organizations as broad as platform providers like Project Finance, down through mid-market financial institutions, to long tail, to fintechs and neobanks as well. And so we are really seeing the gamut of interest here, and we're really excited to see the adoption and amplification of our totality of our data connectivity suite.
And you mentioned fintechs there, and I think that's actually critical. Don, you and I were talking about this last night. You know, I think there's a little bit of a perception that FDX is for banks and fintechs are doing something else. One, is that true? And two, what's the value of having fintechs sort of adopt some of the same standards that banks are adopting for API interoperability?
Strangely enough, some trends. You can't look at a bank as a soda can with a straw in it, just data flowing out of it. They're actually net data consumers. Think about it. If they can talk to a peer bank and pre-fill their mortgage app or their credit card app or their onboarding, they get authoritative proof that John exists. He's got 2 years of transactions, so he's not a synthetic, dreamed up a few years ago. But think about what that would do for the onboarding side. So there's a lot of use cases for data flowing in, but not just from pure banks. The fintechs themselves have a lot of useful data as well. And again, every use case we gave for having a common interoperable royalty-free standard owned by a not-for-profit that's not going to compete with anyone. So for antitrust rules, it really is useful. I think that's really useful. And so you'll start seeing data sources in the fintech space and that volume actually come to eclipse what's coming out of the FIs.
Raja, if someone is interested in Core Exchange, what's the first step they should take?
Well, the first thing anyone should do is reach out directly to Plaid. And we, I think we will at some point show the next slide, which is go to www.plaid.com/data-connectivity or email us at dataconnectivity@plaid.com. I think importantly, as we are thinking through how we move forward, like, know that Plaid is constantly focused on the innovations that is going to keep the industry at its best possible place and in support of consumer rights and data rights and ensuring that that actually gives access to everyone. And so we will continue to work with FDX in ensuring that new items are available, that we're ensuring to inform the industry as we see innovation happen across the fintech and financial services industry. And that continued evolution can be something that anyone can certainly depend upon when they look at Plaid to ensure that we're bringing them forward.
And same question for you, Don. FDX membership is full at this point. No new people can come in, but
there's always room.
No, if someone wants to get one, what are the benefits of being directly involved in FDX? And then if someone wants to enjoy those benefits, what's the first step that a company can take?
Sure. I mean, the spec, of course, is free, but certainly it's being part of the group, being part of the community, the people who've implemented it, and being able to reach out. It's a very collegial group. I don't know anyone who hasn't raised their hand in a work group or task force and said, hey, how are you guys dealing with bookkeepers or accountants logging in instead of the actual client? Hey, how are you dealing with, and had 2 or 3 legitimate offers for help offline. Our members are all interested in the mission. We're trying to help everyone else. We're all interconnected, truly, and so you see fraud here and a mule account here. It's everybody's problem because those funds are moving around. So the extent that we can get IDs and passwords out of the ecosystem and get you a seat at the table, I think it's important. 2, you get to see things that are coming up soon. You get to have a vote and see what things you want to put in there. I will put a shout out, because of fintech involvement, we actually have a fraud endpoint. Turns out apps start to see pre-fraud before the banks see the funds exfiltrated. Go figure. But until recently, unless the app had contacted a bank to reach out to let know, hey, by the way, something's odd with John's account, there's nothing you could do. Now we have these same secure rails you can flow back upstream and say, hey, by the way, I saw on such and such app over this connection, I saw an issue with John's savings account, and here are the indicators of compromise. Nothing got in, but you should know about it. Great signal to noise ratio, highly ingestible. Now they can make a good decision about what they want to do. But until recently, that didn't exist. That wasn't in our roadmap, but our members, specifically our fintechs, said, hey, we want to help too. This is a problem for everybody. And so we took that on.
And people who want to join, should they reach out to you directly? What's the right way to find you? Twitter, Instagram?
Certainly go out to financialdataexchange.org. We'd love to have you as a member. It's relatively inexpensive to join. It's based on revenue size, just like every other standards body does, so it's really affordable to do. And what's neat about FDX, it's one firm, one vote. Best idea wins. Leave your market cap at the door. If you're 2 young ladies in a garage with a great idea, you have the same vote in our working groups to approve something as Visa or MasterCard or anybody else. Very democratic. It's kind of cool to see the arena of ideas in its purest sense.
I think you missed that you need to do a TikTok dance to also join as well.
That's afterwards when the cash bar is open. But
Okay.
Because we have such a packed room, I do want to throw it open. If anyone in the room has questions about either Core Exchange or FDX or APIs generally, happy to take one of those questions. We have a microphone, or I can just repeat the question so that people online can hear it. I'll repeat. So anyone have a question either for Raja, Don, that they want to ask? I can also call on people if people are feeling shy. Yes?
Do you guys know if Intuit has decided to go on like FDX or something common?
So the question is whether Intuit has decided to go on FDX or something common as part of their approach.
well, they're on our board. They're instrumental in having written version 1 of our spec. And so I have every intention of it. But I can't comment on any member's business practices. But I can tell you why be on the board and why I've been doing it for so long. They also help run OFX, which merged into FDX, 3 years ago. And so OFX is resting comfortably within FDX.
And actually, that reminds me of another question. Is US only, or do you have bigger ambitions than that?
Well, it's really wherever our members are. So we have members on 4 continents. We have 1/3 of our membership is Canadian. And there's a lot of interest. One of the things is we're the only market-driven spec out there. Most everywhere else is driven by government mandate. Governments aren't known for innovation, which is, well, everyone's laughing. But like, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Folks who brought you to the DMV. And so the idea is we don't take any government funding. We're not, so if you think about it, we're not relying on any election calendar. We're not relying on any change in government, any new shiny object coming in front of them, or any new crisis diverting attention away. We're here to solve market problems for our members. So we're going to be durable and last a lot longer than some of these government-run entities.
And are you seeing, just to follow up before I turn back to the audience, Roger, are you seeing that same interest from FIs of, we want to do this on a market basis, and Core Exchange is an approach to doing that, as opposed to, well, let's just sit around and wait for the government mandate to come get us?
Yeah, it's actually exactly the first point, which is, hey, look, we understand that there will be a regulatory framework that is delivered. There have been steps down that path. But the reality is that, like, most organizations don't want to be left behind because the market itself has already chosen what is going to happen, as evidenced by those same statistics. Like, if you are not supporting the access to the fintechs and the ecosystem, like, that's going to be negatively impactful to your business. how do you evolve as consumer preferences change? And how do we start thinking about a way in which all of these things kind of operate in one spectrum such that the consumer truly benefits? One thing that we didn't actually talk about is like the average consumer has 3+ applications that they're using. They're probably having a whole bunch more, but those are active use cases. And so it already means that financial life is distributed. And so getting into there and not preventing that is really important. And so I think that market-driven approach is exactly what's driving all of the financial institutions that we interact with.
And as someone who's been in government for longer than I've been at Plaid, I have never heard a single private sector company say, we just wish the government would build our critical infrastructure for us, especially when it's IT infrastructure. So I imagine that resonates with both your members and the folks that you're talking with about Core Exchange.
You know, I think one thing that's really interesting is I think this type of partnership is actually a huge benefit to the government and to the regulatory bodies, because we're taking a proactive approach to developing standardization, to developing a way that is safe and secure. And I actually think that's the type of approach that wins, because it is always focused on the consumer. And ultimately, I think that's what the regulation is all about in the first place.
You've heard the same thing, right? Yeah.
I will, but I will give a shout out to the regulators, and they talk to FTX quite frequently as a proxy for what's going on in the market. And they've shown a great degree of maturity, I feel, in saying, you know what, we'll stick to the policy what's of what we want to have happen, and let the market decide on the how, because they own the customer relationship, they own the risk, both financial and otherwise. So, and let them innovate. And if you think about it, it really makes a lot of sense in a very practical sense. If, God forbid, they were to pick standards and pick a great standard, it's kind of behind the scenes. There's no upside there. If they pick a bad standard, they're going to be pilloried. So there's no actual net upside to it. So I think they've shown a great deal of maturity and forbearance to say, you know what, let the market do all the technical seeing. And if you think about it, that's probably really one of the best things they could do. Thinking in the security space, God forbid we ever find something. Let's say TLS 1.2 is deprecated. We can very quickly pivot on a dime in the industry. Whereas if a government did it, they have to have hearings, they have to have a comment period. Meanwhile, whatever day zeros, yeah, vulnerabilities age like milk, right?
Almost like when it comes to a technical standard or an API, you should maybe let the API experts do it rather than try and sort of do it yourself if you are not expert in that field.
Fair enough.
I'd like to put a plug in that Plaid is an API majority company. And so I would classify in the expert category.
I would not qualify as that expert, as everyone here knows quite aggressively. But yes,
in the category.
We've got the expertise here,
yes.
Adjacent to me, if
That's
not with me. I think we have time for one more question from the audience, if someone has one.
One of the questions I always get is, FTX is only for large companies, and the answer is no. We have academics and consumer groups, but we also have a lot of smaller FIs that manage some or all of the tech stack, and credit unions as well that punch well above their weight. And it's amazing to talk to these folks who wear so many hats, and I feel guilty because I know they've got to be putting in 70 hours a week at their day job and then come lead FTX technical committee meetings, but somehow they manage to do it, so.
Just on that note, I think it's critically important. It drives a lot of what we do is to ensure we're meeting organizations where they are. We know that not everyone can be someone who manages a massive digital infrastructure and can make those investments. And so if we can make decisions that help meet all of these organizations where they are, it's only better for everyone.
Right, because at the end of the day, the customer of every FI is going to want the same experience. They're not going to want it to feel different. And you as an FI are not going to want to have a different feel and lose customers because someone else is doing it better. And that's where that core interoperable standard, setting it for the entire market, really does create a level playing field for everyone to compete on.
Fair enough.
So with that, I think we're going to wrap up for the day. Thank you very much, everyone in the room. Thank you very much, everyone online. Big round of applause for Raja and Don. Thank you guys so much for being here. And safe travels home, everyone.